Yeah. Good morning, everyone. It's 9:03 on July 24th, 2025, and we are here for the meeting of the Board for Professional Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geologists. Selena, can you start us off with roll call?
President Martinez,
Here.
Vice President Rufino, Dr. Amistad,
Here.
Dr. Ascari,
Here.
Ongyo,
Here.
Ms. Haggard,
Here.
Mr. Hallinan,
Here.
Mr. Hartley,
Here.
Ms. Matheson,
Here.
Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Villegas,
Here.
Mr. Waldeck, Ms. Wong.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Frank, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of course. Please place your hand on your right side and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will not open up the floor for public comment for items not on the agenda. Seeing none, moderator, can you open up WebEx for comments?
Certainly. This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on something that is not already on the agenda, you may look for the hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen. We are displaying instructions, and if you are on a mobile device, that hand icon might be behind the 3-dot other options. If you're a call-in user, you can press *3 on your keyboard, on your keypad, to raise your hand. We do have a request. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. And we do have a request to speak from Rob McMillan. Rob, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your mic. And Rob, did you see a pop-up that asked if you wanted to get to unmute yourself?
Yes, it looks like it's working now. Thank you.
There you go. Yes, go ahead.
And Rob McMillan, California Land Surveyors Association. Just wanted to say thank you for providing this opportunity to attend remotely. I appreciate, and CLSA appreciates all the hard work of the board and the board staff. And thank you very much. Sorry I couldn't be there in person.
Thank you for your comments.
And I do not see any other requests for public comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
We have one person in the public that would like to speak.
Hi, my name is William Estepa. I'm here representing ACEC, American Council of Engineering Companies. And I wanted to welcome myself to the board. It's my first meeting. I'm replacing Bob DeWitt, who has retired last year. So I'll be more present at these meetings, and I just want to introduce myself to you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no further comments. We're moving on to administration.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
I'm Dawn Hall, Administrative Services Unit Manager, and I have the financial report for you. It's in your board materials for fiscal year 2024-25. We have actual results through FM11. The revenue report is beginning on page 14. We're about $11.6 million in total revenues, and we've exceeded our full year projection. At this point, the increases over the projection are mostly in the initial application and examination fees. We're expecting to also meet our full year renewal revenue projection when we report the full year results. The fund condition statement is not updated to reflect the actual revenue, and increases in the revenue over projection will have a positive impact on the overall fund balance and the months in reserve calculation. Let's see. Expenses are reported on page 15 in your board materials, and they have been updated to reflect increases in AG and OH costs. The increases were just under 141,000, and they are reflected on the fund condition statement and have had a small impact on the month in reserve calculation. Last board meeting, we reported 1.7 months in reserve, and this meeting, we're reporting 1.6. The fund condition statement is on page 16. The total projection for our expenses for fiscal year is, last fiscal year is 12.3. And the months in reserve, as I mentioned, decreased from 1.7 months to 1.6. It also, the fund condition statement has been updated to reflect the lower new budget for fiscal year 25-26. And we're currently working on updating the full year revenue and expenses, our internal board projections for the expenses, and expect to be able to report the full year 24-25 results either in September or November. Any questions?
Yeah, Don, I had a quick question on page 16 at the fund balance reserve for economic uncertainties. I could never figure out such a large negative for 25-26 and 26-27. Could you just enlighten us again about those negatives? Because I keep trying to figure out how we got such a big amount.
So the budget year and budget year +1 reflect very conservative revenue calculations or projections. As you know, we are pursuing a fee increase. And so we expect those projections to be updated as soon as we can submit the regulatory package. And that will have a positive impact on the fund balance as we increase revenues. And then the other piece of that, the other side of that is expenses. And we reflect the full delegated budgetary authority in our expense lines. However, we do usually have $1 to $2 million of savings or reversions, so we don't spend to the full authority. But conservatively, we show those amounts because that is what could happen.
I see.
So if our revenues, if we're unable to achieve our fee increases and increase our revenues, and we did expend the full budgetary authority, we would have a negative fund reserve. We don't actually anticipate that happening. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, I was not going to ask about the months in reserve, except to comment that it seems that no matter how good everything else looks, like revenue exceeding the annual projection a month early, the months in reserve still looks sad, but I do understand. And if it looked good, then there wouldn't be a justification for a fee increase. So that's good. I was going to ask you to define a couple of terms that you went through. I think you said increases in OG and perhaps OH. There was some other initial I didn't understand.
The Attorney General and Office of Administrative Hearing Costs.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi. So recently, all of the bill that I'm paying, if you pay with the credit card, they increase 3%. And if you pay with the debit card, they increase 1%, like gas bill, AT&T, wireless. Any bill that I'm recently paying, they add 3%, which is the norm now. And last week I paid for my fee for the PE and SE, and I paid with a credit card, and we are not increasing that 3%. And there is no way that you pay with directly from the bank. So the way that it usually works is if you pay directly from the bank, there is no additional fee. If you pay debit card, is 1 to 2%, and if you pay with credit card, is 3%, and that's the norm of like all of the bill that I'm paying recently. So my question is, do we know how many people pay with credit card or debit card, and how much it costs? And is there a way that we add the 3% if they pay with the credit card, and allow a way that they pay directly with the bank so it doesn't cost the board, cost us?
So I think we're at better than 95% participation with the online Connect system for renewals. And all of those transactions that go through Connect right now are credit card transactions. So I would say most of our transactions are through credit card. We do get the statements from the banks to reflect the fees that we pay. At this point, we're not putting on a per transaction fee to licensees and applicants when they pay with a credit card. And I don't believe that we have the ability to take a ACH transfer at this point without incurring more development costs. And the last time I checked, I don't think that the contract that we have with the bank that handles the credit card transactions, I don't think we have the ability through that contract to take ACH payments. And we don't take debit card payments at all. It's all credit card.
Rick?
Yeah, she's correct. We're one of several boards who've asked to have an option for licensees or applicants to pay by bank. Where the understanding is it's just not available to us yet from the development, or if there's been enough requests to have that done. And it's currently not available under the current contract, like Don's saying. We also, to remind you, I think we discussed this during our sunset in 2024. We discussed both in our sunset discussions we had at our board meetings, plus during the discussions we had when the board voted to change the fees. We discussed what the costs were associated with the board absorbing the transaction fees versus passing those on to the external users. And this board has chosen to absorb those because they're not that much of a deficit for us that we can absorb that and not pass that on. So that's where we're currently at with the process.
Thank you.
Any more comments from the board? Seeing none, opening up the floor for public comment. Seeing none, WebEx moderator, can you please open up WebEx for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a public comment on the report, you may look for the hand icon, typically at the bottom of your WebEx screen. If you're on a mobile device, that hand icon might be behind the 3-dot other options. And if you're a call-in user, you can press *3 to raise your hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any questions or any comments on the budget report or the administration report? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. And thank you, Don, for your presentation. Moving on to enforcement. Good morning.
I am Brooke Grabowski. I'm the Enforcement Program Manager. The enforcement stats begin on page 21 of your meeting materials. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Oh, go ahead, Christina.
So we have 2 new board members here. So I'm wondering if you can actually just give a little overview, maybe for the, for the new board member, just to educate them what we're looking at here. Would that work? Sorry about that, to put you in a hot seat.
Okay, so the first page on page 21. This shows the number of complaint investigations that were opened and completed for each of the last 12 months of the fiscal year, of the last fiscal year. The table underneath shows opened and completed for the past 4 fiscal years, the totals. On page 22, we have the numbers of pending citation, or I'm sorry, pending complaint investigations that are open and under investigation. The next table shows the average days from opening a complaint investigation to the completion of the investigation. On page 23, we have a breakdown of the ages of the cases for each of the past 12 months of last fiscal year. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. On page 24, these are the completed investigations, the breakdowns for the past 4 fiscal years of the percentages of cases that were recommended for citation, for formal disciplinary action, or were closed without either of those 2. On page 25, we have a breakdown of all of the stats for the citations that have been issued, length of time from the opening of the investigation to the date that it became final, the number of days between the issuance of the citation and the date that it became final. On page 26, and this is formal disciplinary action, and it's very similar to the stats for the citations in the timeframes for the completion of those matters. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you, and thank my colleague for that. Thank you. I just want to thank you and my colleague for that. As somebody who's worked in various jobs that do investigations, I was impressed with the timeliness, and I thought the outcomes seemed appropriate, average for that. So thanks again.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Comment.
Comment, Christina?
Yes. So, Brooke, thank you so much for letting me. I know it's not easy, to explain that. I do have a question about, the page 26, the average days from referral for formal disciplinary action to effective date of final decision. And so I know it's not within, our control, that is, once we make the referral, it goes back to the AG's office and, for them to do the work. And so what do you think it costs the, the increase for another 3 months? Because it's like the trend is steadily increasing, the days to, for them to process the case.
Right. We had a few that just took a while, and because it's such a small number of cases that go to formal disciplinary action, having a few that take a long time really increased the stats.
So do they include those in the, outside California, who are those cases that include it? Is it just like, actually, let me reframe it. So what are those cases, that right now is, counted, as the, being processed by the AG office?
I'm not quite.
So are they, I was thinking about like there are cases that is kind of like, at the Supreme Court level, that kind of stuff. So do they count those? No.
No, those aren't counted. These are the ones that our investigations found that there were potential violations, and we sent those to the Attorney General's office to pursue formal disciplinary action. And it goes through to the end of that decision or a, settlement in that matter. The others that are outliers, that are with, outside, in the outside courts, those are not counted in these stats.
Okay.
So these are all administrative. So the
Yes.
administrative arena, these are all the cases that come to you eventually. These are our licensees that we can only take formal disciplinary action against our licensees.
Yes.
So these are all handled through the administrative law judge in administrative arena for you guys to take action on eventually. What it's been my experience that when we see this chart climb, the bottom left-hand chart, what's that on 26? It's like Brooke was saying, there's generally some cases that have been at the AG for a long time, maybe have been rescheduled with Office of Administrative Hearings, have been there the longest, and they're finally being closed and completed. These are ones that you've already seen. Now that tends to raise the number because it's such a small amount that's actually over there for us.
Yes. Yes.
That help?
Yeah, I hear you. And I'm just still thinking about like, what's the hang up? Because, it's just,
Sometimes we don't have control over them requesting, the other side requesting extensions. Sometimes there's various factors because it's usually not on us, as you mentioned, it's not in our arena at that point. Sometimes we have additional complaints coming against the subject. So it's also for the new board members, when you see some of these numbers, I'm behind monitors here. But when you see these numbers, it's not a one-to-one. So when there's formal disciplinary action against a licensee, that could be 3 complaints. They're formed into one formal accusation from us. So it's not a one-to-one thing. Sometimes we'll, in a process after submitting something to the AG's office, we'll receive additional complaints. And if we think that rises to the level that it needs to go to AG, we will add those on. Sometimes that's usually on our side, but most of the time it's scheduling, it's setting the hearing, it's whether hearings, how many days the hearings go on, and then that coming back to you and having a decision being made. It's usually that process.
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
So if there's one complaint against the licensee, and there might be, well, in my world, different charges or counts, is that how, it wouldn't be a separate case for this charge, separate case for that charge? Is that what you're saying?
Well, and I'm gonna, Brooke, jump in anytime you think I'm going off the cliff here. So it's all by complaints. And so complaints could come in from different complainants and they could be similar charges. So we look for those trends. They could be similar violations, or they could be completely different projects, completely different violations. And so if we feel like the accusation needs to reflect that, we'll update those. Is that okay? Is that okay, Brooke?
Yes,
Good.
and the accusation will include all of the different charges.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Desiree. I had a question on.
Yeah, turn, wait, there's a little button.
My apologies. Good morning, I'm Desiree, and I just had a question on page 25, and it might be what Rick was just speaking to about the number of citations, but it looks like in 2024 and 2025, we have an increase over the prior 3 years of citations. I was just curious if you can comment on that or if you have any insight as to why that might be increasing.
I really don't. It has come up at the previous board meetings as
Okay.
well. It's been a noticeable trend. There have been more complaints opened, but the percentage has increased as well in the number of citations that have been issued, and there really isn't much of an explanation for that. They
Okay.
just have.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone, Rosanna?
Also, didn't we make it easier for people to complain online? Maybe that could explain how there's a spike or an increase in complaints?
In the number of complaints, certainly, I think that it's been a lot easier with the Connect system. So in 2020, the we released a new way of filing complaints online. Previously, people had to either mail or email them to our board. Now that they're able to go online and fill out a complaint form and upload all of their evidence, it does make it easier for people to file complaints.
I'd just like to back up to page 21. I'd like to commend the staff on the amount of cases you've closed and investigated. If you look at 2024, the number of open cases is 398. The second highest number in the last couple of years was 387, but you've closed 386 this year. So you're doing way more work and more efficiently than you have in the past. And I think that's great. I think you're moving that needle forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I do think that the unit is doing a really, really good job.
Any more comments from the board? Opening the floor to public comment. Seeing none, moderator, can you please open WebEx for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the enforcement report, you can look for the hand icon and click that. Our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on the enforcement report? I do not see any requests. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator. And
You're welcome.
thank you, Brooke. All right. Rick's up. Moving on to exams and licensing. You don't want to hide anymore?
It's on now. Okay. So I'm going to present on exams and licensing, which begins on, I'm much slower without my mouse, so sorry. Begins on page 29, it looks like. So in an effort to appease one of our former structural and board members from questions at every board meeting we've had recently, we finally have enough examination data from the new structural exam to actually provide some kind of statistics and charts to you. I hope he's happy. So beginning on page 29, we address for the new board members, structural exam has been one of those exams that has arisen in controversy, ebbed and flowed over the decades because of the different formats and the way it's changed. It used to be a state exam that was used by several states on the West Coast. It used to be a combination of the national exams and state exams. It went to the 16-hour national exam that we all agreed to, so we got rid of the state exams. And it recently was the last exam from the National Association that converted to computer-based testing. Any conversion to computer-based testing has had its issues, and which is not a bad thing. It's a change. Anytime there's a major change in format for examination, for those of you that are licensed with the bar, you probably know this from the last couple of years, hearing all the news about that. There's always some things, but even if there's not a problem with the exam itself, it's a whole new environment. It's a change in exam. So it always has some kind of reflection. People that produce exams understand this, and they try to make sure there's no major issues that are happening. They had some issues when they introduced this exam. It's a very difficult exam, in my opinion, to convert into any other format at this point. The way in which they test it. I think they've done a pretty decent job given everything that they have to deal with that, but it does need some maturing, and it's working, supposedly they're working towards that. There's two main components. There's breadth and there's depth. And there's also vertical components with structural. I'm not a structural engineer, so please forgive me if I say something wrong, but there's a vertical component to the structural exam and there's a lateral component. And there's also buildings and bridges. we don't see an impact from the bridges so much in California because we don't have a lot of our future structural engineer licensees that sit for the bridge exams. They choose the building exams more than bridges. I'm not sure if that's much different across the country. It may be a little higher in some other states. So there's multiple components within this. And now because it's converted to computer-based testing, there are separate scoring components and separate scores are released instead of all one compiled score. The important part about that is until you pass all the 4 required sections, you have not passed the structural engineering exam to be considered for licensure. It seems like the candidates, based on these charts, what I have in these charts, and this is something that I commonly do with a lot of our exams, is I try to track how our California candidates do in comparison to the national average. So you can see in that top chart, the blue line is that is the number of candidates who sat nationally for the structural exam, the PE structural exam vertebral breadth portion. It's only been in CBT for 3 administrations so far. And so you can see there's the national average and the number of exams administered, and you can see what percentage of those are California. And these, when I say California, these are people that have either applied to us for a structural engineer license and we've approved them to sit for these exams, or now because of recent changes, they go ahead, we allow them to sit for the structural exams before they apply to us for the structural license. But they choose our board when they schedule for that. The second chart down on 29, this is the pass rate of that vertical breadth portion. And you can see California average is a little bit higher pass rate. I would say that's probably pretty consistent in terms of the type of knowledge and experience that we require for structural engineering license in California. Not all states have a structural engineer license. Not all states require a separate license for structural engineer. But we, in California, you have to be a civil engineer first, then you have to be able to demonstrate 3 additional years of structural engineering responsible charge to qualify for the structural engineer license. On the next page, now we're talking about the building lateral breadth. You can see a little bit lesser numbers sat for these both nationally and from a California candidate perspective. And you can see again, our pass rates tended to exceed the national average so far through these through these 3 administrations, which to me, after watching it for a number of years, this is about what I would have expected normally. When we get to page 31, now we're talking about some of the areas that are a little bit more problematic in terms of what is the issues or the hurdles they're having to deal with computer-based testing is the depth portion. This, as it says, it's a much more in-depth type exam format. Candidates, one other aspect here is when these were in paper and pencil, candidates were allowed to bring books in and reference guides. When it went to CBT, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to have your box of books at each CBT station. That added complexity both for the people developing the exam and the people taking the exam. Reference materials were not what the candidates expected, and I think some of that is probably being worked on now too. But you can see the number of people who sat for the vertical. It should align pretty closely with the breadth because these people need to pass all portions. But when you see the pass rates at the bottom of that page, that's where we're starting to see some issues. And until I had enough administrations to really track this, we just got the most recent administration just a few weeks ago, the data from it. So you can see this is the first time we fell slightly, and we're not talking about a lot of people, but it doesn't take much to fall 1 percentage point below. But anything really, once you start getting below 20% and into the teens, that's problematic. And regardless of the size of the population, that's problematic. So these are why there's a lot of controversy right now at NCWS with some of the boards that are licensed structurals are having a lot of issues with this. This is why our favorite emeritus structural member in the back, who I'm sure is going to be speaking soon, has concerns, and the organizations have concerns, and the applicants do also. But now we're able to provide this information to you so you can start seeing it. In the past, they didn't score these separately, so we really didn't report these to you. There was no point. You had to pass all the portions to get licensed. All we cared about is, did you pass all the portions? We still care about that, but now we're actually seeing exam results for these. So it's a good time to start providing that information to you. And for Desiree and Tom, this is something that we do have in our board bulletin annually. It's something that our examination manager wasn't able to be here today. We have an exam meeting going on right now. And about once a year, we try to report a little bit more statistics. And I thought this would be a good meeting for that since we have 2 new board members. It just gave a good opportunity for that. So before I move on, is there any comments about that? Because I know we're going to have public comment. And I thought I would let you guys talk about it first.
Betsy, and then Ali.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. As a non-engineer board member who's been on the board for 10 years, I've absorbed a little of the terminology. Everyone knows that I often ask for definitions of acronym or acronyms.
Acronyms, I'm going to remember
Yeah,
that.
anachronism. So I would like to tell you what I understand about vertical and lateral, and then you can correct me. And then I was wondering if someone could provide an example of a kind of breadth question. I understand in depth. I don't think I understand breadth. But to me, vertical is the building's strength against gravity, just the weight of the building and its contents, if we're talking about a building. And then lateral incorporates wind and seismic and trucks, whatever else would vibrate the building side to side. Then I also recall that there's a California state exam on seismic. Is there some seismic in the national exam and then more seismic in the California state exam?
Well, I'm going to answer a little bit of the last part, and then I'm going to defer to Ollie, our structural engineer board member, because I could not answer a lot of that intelligently. So for our state civil exams, we have 2 state civil exams, seismic principles and engineering survey. And because they have that authority and because the legislature and the board feels that that's important for our candidates to demonstrate to be licensed as a civil engineer. Civil engineers in California can practice structural engineering. That we consider structural engineering civil engineering. However, we have unique additional codes, state codes in California for public schools and hospitals require a structural engineer license. So that's why we have the additional mastery license. The seismic principles exam, I would believe probably does get a little bit into some of the same aspects, but it's more focused, in my understanding, on the application of civil engineering as it relates to the building code. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rosanna, Ollie, and go for it. Answer Betsy's questions.
So first, I want to appreciate the staff for putting this together. This is very informative. Thank you very much. And so the way that the structural exam is, usually if it stayed the same, it's like we have 40 questions for the breadth, and it's like 5 minutes each. So it's
You may want to speak in the microphone.
So it's very, it's on the surface, like the basic knowledge, and then the depth. We had 4 questions. So you have different material. You have steel, masonry, wood, and concrete. So there are those. And so going back, structural engineering is in 2 different things. One is the analysis, which says what is your building, and how each element gets what forces. And as you said, the vertical is the gravity, like the weight of material and people that are in it. And lateral is the wind and earthquake. And so you put all of those loads per code on the building and see each element, how much load there is. And then you design it. And design each one of those material has different codes, concrete code, steel code. So the way the exam is, one question should be steel, one question should be concrete, one question should. So you have to cover different materials, and then you also have to cover different analysis. So it covers a wide variety. And then 3 of the questions should be seismic on the depth, and 1 of the questions should be the wind. So it covers a lot of. So there is a matrix that come from that package study, that what are a designer need to know, when you go to, design something. That pack studies, has when you design the question, has a matrix that, okay, you have to have like this much analysis, this much connection, this one element design. But 3 of them are focused on the seismic and 1 on the wind. So that is that one. And then as Rick mentioned, for California, it's only hospital and a school, but other state like Washington, all of the significant structure require a structural engineering exam. So they are more concerned because, they require. California, there was some effort from SEAC, Structural Engineer Association, to require structural engineering license for the significant structure, but it wasn't very successful. There was not enough support in different industry for.
Yeah, there was one of the prior, I think I'm going to say 2017, 18, somewhere around then. Our board had a discussion on significant structures. One of the stakeholder associations, SEAC, Structural Engineers Association of California, was interested in modifying state laws to define what significant structures are and what would require structural engineers. Our board discussed it. We hosted several technical advisory committee meetings between the stakeholders and representatives from the board. I don't believe it ever even got into a bill at that point. There were pros and cons on both sides of the situation. And through the convening years, there have been several other states all around us that have enacted significant structure statutes, especially along the West Coast. That's what you're referring to, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then another thing that happened in the zone meeting or in the NCES, we are adding 1 hour from April of next year to each in-depth exam, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so a couple months ago, NCWS announced, because at that point they were seeing some of the concern, they were hearing the concerns, definitely hearing the concerns from the candidates. They were hearing it from several of the boards. We talked about it at the zone interim meetings. I'm sure we'll be talking about it next month at the annual meeting. They're trying to address some of those concerns. One of the things, they went back with their psychometricians, the experts on exam development. And one of the things they were able to discern out of the first 2 administrations, especially in the depth portion, is that the exam was speeded, which means that no matter whether it was the higher performing candidates on those exams or the lower performing candidates, they were all using up every bit of available time. And so the psychometricians were able to see that there wasn't sufficient amount of time. So they made a recommendation to NCWS to let's add an additional hour onto the depth portion of the exam. And they, starting the administration, is that going to start this October or April? I think next April, right?
Next April.
So next April, it'll start with the depth portion next April, because you have to get all the formats set up with the computer-based testing centers. And And they're currently conducting in the midst or toward finalizing a new, what's referred to as a PAC study. It's an occupational analysis of the profession to make sure that they're still dialed in the way they should have. That was already scheduled before this. They're on their normal every 5 to 7 year schedule to do that. So that could have some impact on future changes to this too, as they learn that. So we'll see how that happens. We'll learn a lot more at the annual meeting. And before we go to public comment, Guerrero, if there's no other comments.
Tom?
Go ahead.
So again, another rookie layperson question. We have 4 parts to the exam. We exceed the national average on 3, but we're below on this 1. And I forgot if you said that was historical or something new that's developed.
Historically, California candidates tend to perform as well as the national average or better on the structural exam. It's rare that we drop below the national average. I would say the fact that we're 1 percentage point below here is reflected by the numbers more than anything else, but it does tend to match how those numbers really dropped quite a bit for that portion, that one exam portion or section. Yeah. I'd like to go on to page 32. That was a vertical we were talking about. We also have the lateral, similar charts for the lateral. So we have lateral depth. Again, you can see the number of people who sat for it. And then you can see our pass rates. Again, we're above the national average here. So I just wanted to bring that up we didn't discuss that, I don't think, before we went to public comment. So if you want to ask for public comment or if you have any other questions before I move on to the rest of the statistics.
That's right.
Sorry if you already said it, but how long are the exams currently? And I'm just asking because you mentioned adding an hour and.
So when I say add hours, that's actually a really good question because computer-based testing, they don't think in terms of number of hours so much as they think in terms of the number of questions based on the occupational analysis and the published test plan specifications. They determine the number of questions and then they work with the psychometrician and the vendor the administration and computer-based testing center vendor to see how long a seat time we need for that. And once it gets over a certain number of hours, they get a mandatory break. If they want to take a break for lunch, they could take the maximum amount or go right into the second portion of the exam. It's completely on them. I'm not sure with the structural, there's certain parts of it. Actually, I'm sure in the public comment, do you know, Ollie, how long each section is?
So if I'm not mistaken, it was 5.5 hours and now it's 6.5 hours.
Of seat time, right?
Seat time, yeah. And then the other thing is, the other complaint is about 1/3 or 1/4 of the questions are not being graded. It is for the next exam. So they say that's like usually in the exam it's like 10%, so 25%, it takes a long time. But what they are trying, NCS is trying to do, is trying to make a bank of the question so they can have it more frequently. So the early taker of the exam, have a lot of pre-tests. So that's what complain like, 6.5 hour exam, is a little bit exhausting.
So what happens is items are constantly being developed. They're being developed, they're being reviewed, they have to be vetted through industry standard processes, regardless of whether it's us doing it with our state exams or national associations. And when you go to computer-based testing, especially in situations where you're offering exams more frequently to larger populations, you have to be able to build replacement items. So as items become invalid or over time as maybe codes change or things like that, or they're not performing well, they have to constantly replenish these item banks for questions. Well, the only way to prove that it's a good question is to have statistics on it. In the past, when we did paper and pencil, we would do cut scores after the exam was administered to see how the questions administered are performed. But a lot of those questions were brand new. No one ever saw them before. Now with computer-based testing, it gives you the ability to do what's referred to as pre-test questions or items. So it's a certain percentage. So for instance, on our civil exams, each of our civil exams is 55 questions. That's 50 scorable questions, 5 pre-test items. Ever since we've been CBT with our state exam since 2011, we've always had pre-test items on there. Whether the applicants know that or not, they've always had pre-test items, because we want to see how they perform in the real world and make sure that they can stand up to be in the right competency level. We don't want them too difficult. Don't want them too easy. So that adds another level of complexity to the structural exams, is how to define good pretest items that don't make the applicants spin their wheels and waste a lot of time, but also at time how to replenish this item bank. As Ollie said, they want to be able to offer exams a lot more frequently than they can, but it depends on population, depends on the number of items they have in their item bank. So all that goes into that, folds into that.
Mike?
So I'm looking at the percentages and the number of people taking the tests, and have a question for possibly somebody in the audience. I don't know how many structural engineers are retiring every year in California, but if we're only licensing 20 or 30 every year, that seems like not enough.
We're licensing more than 20 or 30 a year. It's just people just passing that portion.
Yeah, but they can't be licensed until they pass all the portions.
Correct.
So how many do we license?
I reported on this on the last meeting. And I'm going by memory, but I think last year we licensed about 70 or 80. It has gone down. The numbers, we used to be up about twice that. But it started going down before this. I can't remember exactly what I reported last time.
Any other comments from the board? Opening the floor up for public comment.
Come on up.
Come on up. There you are. It's on.
There we go. I don't know who this grumpy structural engineer is you're talking about, you're referring to.
I didn't say grumpy.
But whoever he is, I'm sure he's very happy that what you did with presenting this information. So thank you on his behalf. No, this is very good in terms of showing us what the comparison is. Just a little bit of a correction. The question that you had, Tom, about how California compares to the national. We've been tracking this for over 20 years, probably closer to 30 years. And the California pass rate has fluctuated very close to the national. Sometimes been a little below, sometimes been a little above. To see it consistently above is a surprise. That's not typically what we've seen in the past. You would think that it would be, especially because we require a civil license before you can sit for the structural exam. Some states don't. So that may be why we're seeing this change now. There's more states now that will license structural engineers and don't require a civil license first. So that could be one reason why we're seeing this. As far as a question that I had for Rick was on the breadth exam, which is multiple choice exam, that can be taken anytime. The depth exam is only taken in April and October, but the other exam, being a loft exam, can be taken anytime. So I'm asking as a point of clarification, the dates that you have here, I assume that that's the total number that's within that 6-month period.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We do the same thing with our other exams that are loft like that.
Okay. And again, to reiterate what Ali said, they are going to give an extra hour to the depth portion of the exam beginning April of next year. And then in April of 2027, they should have the new specification for the exam. So the exam may change. And it hasn't been decided yet whether that additional hour is going to continue or whether they're going to cut back on it. So talking to NCS staff, that hasn't been decided yet. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. Regarding significant structures, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly. Well, I won't, I'll deal with that when we get to the NCS discussion.
Okay.
So, we'll see if Michael has any questions or comments.
But before you,
Usually he does.
Usually does.
before you go,
By the way, I'm Carl Josephson. I'm a former SC board member and emeritus member of the board.
so you said it was historical, the issue on this. So that being said, has it been determined that the time is the problem? And that's why we're getting the extra hour, or what's?
The NCS staff has talked to Pearson View and their psychometricians. And like Rick was saying, they found that the amount of time to take the exam, even the people who do very well on the exam don't have enough time.
Okay.
So because of that, they've decided to extend it an additional hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any more?
I just wanted to add one more thing. Through the magic of technology, Dawn has let me know, to answer Mike's question, we issued last fiscal year 70 structural engineer licenses.
Thank you. Still seems low.
It is a little low.
Yep. Come on, Carl.
To answer Michael's question too about the number of people retiring versus number of engineers, it is a real concern. It's something that we've talked about within the profession. Washington State, for example, is really being hit hard by it. They have had very few new structural engineers licensed this past year, and they are very upset about it. We're concerned in California, but we don't have the statistics yet to see how many people are retiring versus how many, are getting licensed. But it's a real concern.
So one of the other metrics is what's the average age of a structural, so surveying suffers from the similar, just not enough of a pipeline of incoming candidates and people in the profession, but you can predict how many are going to retire as you see the average age of this grow. If you're not,
I know Michael's in a bigger firm than I am, so he's got probably a better handle on that. Our firm, we have a very, I won't say elderly group, but we have a higher average age probably than most. I know in Michael's firm, he's got a lot of young engineers that are coming up. But one of the difficulties is getting licensed. It is a gauntlet. So.
Is that why you're grumpy?
No, the other grumpy engineer, not me.
The one thing we probably should understand here, with structural licensing is kind of an entire different beast from all the other licensure. As several of you have alluded to, not every state licenses structural engineers. Most states that license structural engineers don't require you to have a PE or a civil engineer license first. It runs the gamut of who takes the structural engineer exam. It's not all the same baseline requirements. So you can look at, say, you can make the assumption that everyone that's sitting for the California civil exams has demonstrated a total of 72 months of civil engineering experience by way of education or work experience or combination thereof, and have passed the national exams. So there's some kind of baseline there, some kind of threshold. With structural, you may have someone in states that it's a generic PE license. They don't license structural specifically, and they're allowed to take any of the PE exams they want, which could include a structural exam. So they've only taken the fundamentals exam, and then they take the structural exam. So there's a moving target in a lot of this. It's very difficult to compare state to state to state. Carl mentions Washington. We have a lot of direct communication with the Washington board because they are the closest to us in terms of requiring a PE before they're allowed to be a structural engineer. Oregon a little bit less so, Hawaii a little bit similar. But once you start getting away from those handful of states, the requirements are entirely different on who sits for those exams. So that adds to the complexity of some kind of comparison and what's appropriate for the studies too. And keep in mind, every licensed civil engineer in California can practice structural engineering, just not for public schools and hospitals. So.
Are there any more comments from the public in the room? Come on up.
You mentioned your name enough, you might as well.
I didn't want you to. We are.
All right. Michael Perlini, licensed civil structural in California, many states, representing CEOC here today, and NCSEA, if you want to say that. To talk about your question, Michael, you think about it. I was thinking about my license number, Carl's license number. There's like 7,300 structural license numbers in California total. There's over 100,000 or at 100,000 for civil?
No, civil,
98?
No, we're probably active licenses,
Oh,
probably.
no, I'm sorry, like license number right now.
We're 2 years away from hitting 100,000.
2 years away from 100,000. We're like 7,300 in structural. People under 3,000 are retired or maybe not with us anymore at this point, right? There's maybe 4,000 or so structurals in the state, or licensed in the state. Some are out of state, right? To pick your number, I was thinking about it. Since I've been licensed in 09, I'm 54. There's 73 just got issued now, plus or minus. That's about 118 every year. So 70 is low on that, to answer the question. The concern is not just the number of structural engineers that come in, it's any engineer that's going to go forward, right? Young people choosing STEM in education is dropping like mad. You guys were all here for the last couple meetings well, most everybody's here for the talks about Sonoma State. They had like 19 students in geology, right? 19, right? Humboldt had 5,000 people in their whole school. And they were like, why don't you be a Cal Poly so that more people will go there, right? That was a bad idea, but whatever. And it's a trouble spot because if we have less people in STEM, we have less people choosing engineering, we have less people doing structural. Yeah, it just subsets go down. So we have to solve this challenge. And Rick and board staff have spent a lot of time with NCES trying to figure that out and being in zone meetings and all these things. But an hour extra isn't going to solve it. It's, PAC survey solves it, like trying to find a new specification, figuring out how it's going to do it, and just encouraging people and young people to get into STEM, right? We don't have enough civil engineers, chemical engineers, geologists, geophysicists, anything. And that's a problem, right? So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments from the public? Moderator, can you please open up WebEx for public comment?
Certainly. If you would like to make a comment on this issue, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand, and call-in users can press *3. We have a request for comment from Hyuk Lee. And Hyuk, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. And Hyuk Lee, you should end up getting a pop-up on your screen saying, "I'm offering to unmute me."
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's kind of distorted, but if you speak up, it should be fine.
Okay. Yeah, I recently re-obtained my PE license after letting it expire for several years, and I ran into a lot of difficulty. I would have thought that it'd be easier to re-obtain after having a license previously.
It's really hard to hear what you're saying. Okay, is there any way you could speak up a little bit more?
speaking right into the microphone. You still can't hear me?
Sounds like you're having issues with your microphone. You're breaking up quite a bit.
Tell you what, let me switch to my laptop. Can you hear me better now?
Possibly. Go ahead and try it again.
Can read what he says here.
Oh.
This is the moderator. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the chat feature so that you can type into the chat. We heard that you were having trouble.
Better now.
Oh, much
Oh,
better.
yeah, much better.
Yeah. Yeah. So after, I was licensed as PE back in 2001 and I let it expire. So I reapplied to reobtain my license and I ran into a lot of difficulty. It was just, I would have thought that it'd be easier if you had a license before to get it back. But in fact, it's actually much, much harder because the website itself didn't allow you to apply even because my old license was still tied to my profile. So that took about 4 months to resolve. And then, after I passed my PE exam, I had to submit all kinds of evidence that I have the applicable experience, which if I had the license before, one would think that experience doesn't expire, right? But I had to provide references upon references and proof upon proof that I have experience. I just feel like the process for a case like this should be a little more streamlined. Like maybe just pass the PE exam again. I think that's fair if you let it expire for many years. Then not have to go through the entire process as if you're a first-time applicant. So that's that's just what I wanted to tell.
All right.
Thank you for your comment. We'll take that into consideration and we'll work internally to see what happens for you.
Okay, thank you.
And I do not see any further requests for comment at this time. Did you want me to, shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Okay, so we're done with structural for the moment. Moving on to page, I think 33. A little background here. So before 2020, we did all of our applications in paper. They were submitted by mail. I'm sure all of you that are licensed on the board did that. And submitted, you download a PDF, print it out, mail it in with all your reference letters and everything. In 2020, we started moving over into an online application licensing system called Connect. And I think the second or third version of that was when we allowed civil engineer applications and land surveyor applications, which really opened the door once we started receiving many, many civil engineering applications. And as we've reported several times here, and you've heard from even public comment, how we gathered quite a bit of a backlog when reviewing civil engineering applications because there were higher numbers than we ever had before. And apparently we made it much easier to submit applications online than we had in the past. So also as a background is we do have licensing staff in our board, and we have what's referred to as senior registrars, which is our 4 licensed positions or our staff positions. Majority of the time, those 4 positions are filled. Currently, 3 of the positions are filled. We have a vacant PE slot that I'll mention later, but we were trying to tackle this backlog, and our licensing staff make sure the application is complete. They're making sure that all the information's there so that the senior registrars can do the appropriate technical review of the education and the experience to approve those applications for licensure, which may or may not include a state exam component. So we were receiving more applications than we were able to complete review of for a while there. I just wanted to point this out. This chart on this page shows a change in that trend beginning last October. So Starting last October, we actually filled the fourth position, which was another civil engineer at the time. And also due to the efforts of our licensing staff, constantly trying to make sure their procedures and processes are the most efficient they could. And through the efforts of our other 3 registrars, which was a civil engineer, a licensed land surveyor, and a licensed geologist, they're all working together to try to help get the backlogs up of the civil applications and all the other applications too. They want to make sure we don't have some of these kind of backlogs. So in October, you started seeing the results of that effort. Basically from October to now, we're approving more complete applications in technical review than we're receiving on a monthly basis. Unfortunately, the engineer that started with us in October left us in March, so we're down to our 3 registrars also, but we still have those 3 registrars and we still have the licensing staff, and you can see how they've been able to maintain and keep this pace going. So I give them a lot of credit for that, but I did want to show that to you guys because in the past we've been reporting how we've been behind in the backlogs. And I wanted you and anyone else that's reading our documents to see that we are making progress on this. So I think this is a good thing. Haven't been asked about lately, but I wanted everyone to know about that.
No, this is great work. I mean, it shows a great improvement and it's
Licensing and the registrars have done a great job. Yeah. Okay, moving on to page 34. So these are some of the annual license statistics that I track just to kind of pay attention to trends, kind of watch what's going on. And we use these when we're forecasting budgets, license renewals, revenues, expenses, anything we try to do if we need to answer questions with the legislature or rulemaking. So, and these will be in our board bulletin that will be published soon here. But you can see that this last fiscal year, we actually licensed more practice acts licenses than we have in a long, long time, probably due to the increase in the number of applications we're getting. Also, for those of you that are new board members, we have practice acts, we have title acts. I think you're licensed as a chemical, correct? So you're considered a title act. So the difference, Tom, is that with practice acts, we regulate the practice and the use of the title, professional engineer, civil engineer, electrical engineer, land surveyor, geologist. With title acts, they're branches of engineers that we don't really regulate the practice. In other words, anyone can practice chemical engineering. But if you want to refer to yourself as a PE or a licensed chemical engineer or a chemical engineer, you have to be appropriately licensed. And you go through the same vetting process, the same education, work experience, education, examination process as any other professional engineer. But that we're unique in that regard in California. Practice acts, title acts, it goes back a long ways. It has been discussed many times in the 90s and early 2000s, and supposedly no one wants to touch it with a 10-foot stick anymore. But that's the way we are. Mechanical and electrical, the first decade, I believe they were around, they were title acts and they became practice acts back in the 70s. So I'm going to reflect the statistics a little differently for both of these because title acts don't have to have a license to practice in California. So anyhow, so first with the practice acts, we're real happy to see these numbers. We did see dips between, if you notice, between 21, 22 and more recently. We think a lot of that is because, again, the backlog. There were a lot of applications that came in due to our new system. It was very overwhelmingly received by our applicants. Also, for those of you that are new, in California, we receive applications for PEs from every state in the country and about 10 countries continuously all the time. So this isn't reflecting licensees that are solely in California. This is anyone that has a California license or wants a California license anywhere they're located. One thing I also do, and I know this chart requires explanation because Guillermo asked about this chart. So this is the first pie chart. What I try to do is I try to track how is our trends toward net licensure in the most recent, say, 10, 12 years compared to the previous 10 to 12 years, just to see if there's any kind of trends that we should be aware of. This is net effect. So these are licenses that are active. In other words, they keep paying the renewal fee. It doesn't mean they may be retired from their career, but they haven't notified the board that they're retired. They may have stopped renewing their license, and until that license is canceled, who knows what's going to happen. But these are the number of active licenses, the net effect. So for instance, structural, we licensed about 70 last year. We were notified by about 25 licensed structural engineers that they want to retire their license. How many others have allowed it to have passed away or allowed it to cancel? We don't know, but we only know what they report to us. So you can see in this chart with the practice acts, you can see the biggest increase we're seeing here is electrical engineers over the most recent 11 years, 10, 11 years. You're still showing an increase in civil engineers, 5,500 civil engineers over that time. And then the next one is mechanical engineers. We're still seeing over 1,200 mechanical engineers. The rest of them, the surveyors, the geologists, the geophysicists, those numbers are showing some smaller numbers. So the percentages jump up, but they are still smaller numbers. Because surveyors always talk about being concerned the number of surveyors and the average age that the surveyors are in any room and wherever the meetings are. Let me scroll down here. So going down to page 35, this is another reflection of that top chart. Is you can see how the biggest growth compared to the previous decade is in the electrical and mechanical field. The long-term type of licensees that have been around since the beginning of time in California, the civil, land surveyor, and the geologist, you can see they don't have the same trend they had the previous decade. Though I will tell you the civil is starting to narrow that gap a little bit. It's just because their numbers are so big, it doesn't appear like they're really closing, but they are narrowing a little bit. There's still a positive net. And geophysicists are still at 3. We don't license a lot of geophysicists. So beginning on page 36, we have the same thing. You see the same trend with the title acts. They're climbing. Number of licenses we're issuing are very high compared to what it used to be. Same with the pie chart, though what you see here is you're seeing predominantly the changes in fire protection. We're still showing a net increase in traffic engineering. We're the only state in the country that licenses specifically traffic engineers. So you can see where the shift is, it's more toward the fire protection. And as I move down to the next page, you can see that. Control systems, fire protection are the big jumps. We're also seeing a little bit, I consider that a jump with the chemical, even though it's only 1. To maintain that kind of number at that kind of low of a population, I think that's showing that it's constantly replenishing. We don't issue a lot of licenses for some of the others. One of the topics at NCWS is whether to continue the PE nuclear exam. That was brought up at the zone meetings. That's right on probation right now because they don't have enough people taking the exam nationally. We average 1 nuclear engineer license a year. We used to average 2.
Rick, where do the geotech engineers fall?
I haven't really tracked those separately, or I track those separately, but I haven't really followed those as much because I tend to track the more foundational licenses, so to speak, because they have more of a reflection on our revenues, expenses, because of the numbers, the sheer numbers. Plus, they tend to illustrate if there's something in society or industry that is reflecting some changes, more with these licenses than those. But I do watch those numbers too. The interesting trend for me has been over the last 4 or 5 years has been mechanical fire protection control systems. You're seeing a change that I think technology is having on the engineering industry, and I that's my guess on that. Yeah, but I could tell you more about those in the.
That'd be nice.
Yeah,
I'm feeling a little left out.
don't want to leave you left out.
Any other comments from the board?
That's it. That's all I have for those charts.
Just to follow up on that, if
Desiree.
anything's foundational, it's geotechnical engineering. But
Wow.
also, I love pie charts. And now with your explanation, I think I understand what these are showing. But I suspect that pie charts are not the best for illustrating just changes with no, I mean, you have to read the numbers to understand whether it's a positive change or a negative change. And I'm not an expert in different kinds of charts, but there's probably something better than a pie chart or 2 pie charts. You could have one for the increases in number of licenses and a separate one for the decreases.
Well, that's why I do this in separate charts. So those 2 charts go hand in hand, the pie chart and the bar chart right after it. You've seen these before. I've been doing these for about 10 years. And you probably had that comment before too.
I was probably even more baffled then, so I kept my mouth shut.
Probably.
Desiree and then Christina. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring this up, but I was curious why we don't have an environmental PE.
Because this board has never chosen to do that is one reason. The other reason is if you look at what nationally they consider environmental, it kind of treads into multiple different branches of engineering and even geology here. So it's difficult to establish another license type that has overlapping practice. There was an effort maybe 6 or 7 years ago, 8 years ago, by PEG, the Professional Engineers California Government, the Union for State Employed Engineers, to implement environmental engineer license. That went as a bill. This board had various concerns with it at times. We tried offering different ways to implement it, and it never proceeded through the process. But that was the last effort that was made, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Well, it makes sense. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
I know many people who have taken the exam and had to go to other states to get their license, and I think that's unfortunate for California, so.
Yeah. I'm not even sure what the population is for the PE environmental exam. I haven't looked at that in a long time. If someone is a licensed PE in another state where it's not discipline specific like us, we tend to gear them, if they ask us and they've passed the PE environmental, we try to tell them, well, base it on your experience, which license you want to apply for here.
Okay.
Whether it's a civil or whether it's a chemical, we try to advise them to look at their experience and guide it that way.
Okay, perfect.
So I want to thank Rick for giving us the overview for, for the kind of what the number of the licensees and who they are. And because I've been always wondering, the difference between, the number of licensees, between the Title Act versus the Practice Act. So this kind of like demystified, if that's a word, about what really, going on. at the same time, I'm looking at this as like, I'm asking myself, so what does that mean? How do we interpret it and how do we look forward for the future? And so to me, there's definitely, a lot more exploration about, what licensing means to the general public, especially, we're seeing like the decrease of, land surveyors and then, the increase of, geologists and mechanical, some of those, engineer types. So I think this is definitely very helpful. So my only suggestion is that, when we do our next strategic planning, this would be something so wonderfully, to prepare, so that we can get a good gauge on what's going on, environment wise, and then we can really decide on, how the direction of the board wanting to tackle that certain issues.
No, it's a good idea. That's a good idea to add that as an update at that time. It's a great idea. Again, through the magic of technology, someone in the back of the room has told me that 349 people took the PE environmental exam in the first half of 2025 nationally last year or this year. So it's quite a bit. Yep.
Are there any more comments from the board? Okay, opening the floor for public comment. Come on up.
Hi, William Steppa with ACC. I love your graphs here.
Like some Betsy.
Yeah. And I like the pie chart. I just had a question in regards to, active practice acts, right? We were talking about geophysicists and I'm a licensed land surveyor. The number's going down. At one point in time, when you're doing this trend, I know it's been 10 years, but when does the board see it a concern when the numbers start to increase negatively? At what point? Is there a cutoff like when it gets to 15%, 20%?
Well, define concern.
Concern meaning that we don't have backfill for licensed practicing individuals here to perform those acts in those professions. And it could become detrimental to the public, right? If we don't have these practicing engineers working in our industry.
So I would say that anytime we see numbers dropping, any of these numbers, it's a concern for us. What level of concern will vary. The fact that, for example, the civils, it shows a change, and I'm back on, I don't know what page this is, page 35. The civils, even though we're licensing less than we were in the preceding decade, we're still licensing, it's still a positive attrition number. So I'm less concerned about that. I'm just tracking that as that's an interesting thing to see where the industry is changing. The other thing is as a board, we're a reactive agency. So we are totally subject to what applications come in. Usually, and I don't know for sure exactly how this is, usually if you're seeing drops in the numbers of licenses, it's less people applying. We're seeing a corresponding drop in the number of applications. So for instance, land surveyor, when I first came to the board in 2007, we averaged about 250 to 300 brand new land surveyor applications a year. And we had about 450 to 500 people taking the exam annually at that time. In the years since, we dropped as low as maybe 100 brand new applications a year for land surveyors and only 200 people taking the exam. Those numbers have been increasing now over the last 3 years, both nationally and in California. So I think we'll see these numbers start reflecting that. We're seeing a higher number of people taking the national land surveying exams and a higher number of people taking the state exams. And we're starting to see an increase in numbers of applications. Now, the increase may be, we got 100 last year and we're getting 110 this year. And they're smaller numbers, but at least it's positive. So we're kind of watching those trends. But anytime any of them are a drop, we get concerned, we watch them, but we don't drive the number of applications. That's what you guys do.
Okay.
Geophysicists is that example. I joke about them. There's only 3 a year. There's only about 140. We're the only state licensed on about 140 total. In a prior sunset, this board got very close to considering getting rid of that license, and considering what to do with that specialty. We have dropped, our board has historically dropped licenses from at times because no one was applying anymore.
Oh.
It just really depends on what happens, but we're at the mercy of what happens in the industry. If there's more surveyors and more civil engineers, more geologists needed, then the applications will be coming in. It's just usually a lag time for us, depending on what happens with the industry.
So it's like a trailing indicator.
You said that much better than I did, yes.
Okay, I just concerned.
Yeah, because the surveyors, I hear from the surveyor organizations all the time about the numbers, and while they were the highest in the nation, of just under 3,900 active licenses, it is dropping. We got as high as 4,200 about 4 years ago. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? No. Seeing none, moderator, can you please open up WebEx for public comment?
Certainly. This is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on the issue, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. Calling users can press *3 to raise their hands, and each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on this issue? I do not see any requests. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Think we're going to take a 10-minute break now?
I was going to suggest
back at 10:45. Thank you. Okay, and we're back in session. Moving on to legislation.
Okay, so you have to listen to me for a little bit longer. I apologize. Legislation begins on page 41 with the legislative calendar, and currently we're actually on page 42. In July, this is their summer recess. So legislature will return, let's see, August 18th. So I'm going to move right into the first bill, which is AB 667 on page 43 is where the staff analysis is on this bill. This is the bill that's related to the implementation of interpreters for state exams. The board has seen this several times. If you remember, I sent you guys an email after last board meeting because I misinterpreted some of the language from last time because this language has gone back and forth. This, as some people at legislatures refer to as the whiplash bill. It's gone back and forth in position of what they're trying to do, but basically the bill was mandating almost all of the boards and bureaus at DCA to allow for an interpreter if an applicant made a request for a physical interpreter to help them for if English is not their primary language during the examination. We were one of several boards that had some concerns with this. Originally with this language, it did not define that it was just state exams, and we can't control national exams, and national exams are only in English for engineering and surveying and geology. It got further refined to just state exams. Then whether it was state exams that were administered by the boards or administered and contracted by the boards or just contracted, it's floated back and forth. So the last position the board took a pose on this because I had advised you guys that it was going to have a pretty big fiscal impact on us if someone requested an interpreter for our state exam, because anyone in the room, if someone requests that a CBT center, they would have to shut the CBT center down to every other examinee, regardless of client, during the duration of that exam. So it would exceed over $500 an hour for the board, and we would have to absorb that cost. we don't even know how many people would request that because we don't recall ever receiving any of these requests. So long story short, the most recent version of this language which was amended on July 8th. Specifically, and I kind of verified this with several other legislative individuals. Basically, we I'm going to look at our staff comment here. The new amendments clarify that the requirement is mandatory only if the use of an interpreter is permitted by the terms of the contract for the administration of the examination. We checked with our contract with our examination vendor. We do not administer any of our state exams ourselves. We contract with Prometric to do that through the computer-based testing centers. And there's no terms of conditions or any clauses whatsoever in our contract that allow for an interpreter. So we are exempt from this as the current amendments are as of July 8th. So at this point, we're recommending that the board change their position to a watch position because at least these amendments do, whether it's directly or indirectly, take into account a lot of our concerns. We still, at this point, if this bill becomes law, we would still have to have questions on our applications, asking people what their preferred language is, and then we would have to report that on a regular basis to the legislature. And those would be added by the department's IT department to all the applications for everybody. So any questions from anyone?
Frank?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Noting the update staff comments and noting the amendments on July 8, 2025, I move that the board take a watch position on AB 667 as amended on July 8, 2025.
A motion from Frank. Are you commenting or seconding?
I would like to second the motion.
Okay, Betsy is gonna second. Okay, is there any discussion from the board? No. Seeing none, we will open the floor for public comment. Seeing none, moderator, can you please open up WebEx for public comment?
Certainly, if anyone would like to make a comment on the motion, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. If you are a call-in user, you can press *3 to raise your hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on the motion? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further comments, Selena, can you call the vote?
President Martinez,
Yes.
Vice President Rufino,
Aye.
Dr. Amistad,
Yes.
Dr. Ascari,
Yes.
Ms. D'Antonio,
Yes.
Ms. Haggard,
Yes.
Mr. Hallinan,
Aye.
Mr. Hartley,
Yes.
Ms. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Villegas, Ms. Wong,
Yes.
motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to, question.
Yep, Tom?
Pardon me.
It's
I
too
just
late.
thought
It's
we
too late.
were- Not on that. Just a general question on legislation. So we're part of DCA.
Yes, sir.
So do we have autonomy ourselves, or do they have to sign off on our positions?
No, being that we are appointed board, we're semi-autonomous in this respect. No, they do not have to sign off on our position. However, I will say that we work very closely with legislative staff at DCA, and we're constantly discussing and collaborating on situations as we are with other boards and bureaus here too.
Thank you.
They ask us our positions all the time about bills, anytime there's amendments. They also, if they want to know if there's any kind of fiscal impact. So every time there's an amendment to any bill that could possibly affect us, they'll reach out to us. Okay, moving ahead to page 52, this is AB 671. The board took a watch position on this in the last board meeting, May 29th. It was amended twice since then. This is a bill that is seeking to modify government code, not one of our acts, to allow for a self-certifying building improvement plans for permitting purposes, and basically determine for local agencies to determine whether engineers or architects could be deemed as a qualified professional certifier to help in streamlining the permitting processes. I'm sure this is something that people have run into for a number of years, but it probably has been escalated due to all the actions with the fire-prone areas. So this is something that came to our attention because of the engineer mentioning. They do, from the very onset of this bill, they do properly reference our act, so that's good. But they did always talk about if self-certifier was not doing things correctly or falsely represented the completeness of the information, that they could be held accountable, but they never defined what that meant. So I believe this was the Sunset Committee, the Business Professions Economic Development Committee. They reached out to us and say, don't you think there should be something in here about who should be responsible in case an engineer did falsely certify to something? We're like, yes. And so they offered some suggested language. We offered some suggested language back. We're still working on that. This is the latest amendments that went in there. We're trying to make sure it's appropriately listed under our act, our PE Act with section 6775. So we're continuing to work with the committee staff and the next committee it's moving to. At this point, we're recommending that the board maintain a watch position based on the amendments of July 9th, 2025.
Are there any comments from the board, or do I have a motion to take a watch position as amended? Frank?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I do move that the board take a watch position on AB 671 as amended on July 9, 2025.
I have a motion from Frank. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Christina. Is there any further discussion from the board? Being none, we'll open the floor for public comment. Seeing none, moderator, can you please open WebEx for public comment?
Certainly, if anyone would like to make a comment on the motion or the bill, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on the motion? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Selena, can you please call vote?
President Martinez,
Yes.
Vice President Rufino,
Aye.
Dr. Amistad,
Yes.
Dr. Ascari,
Yes.
Ms. D'Antonio,
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Mr. Hallinan,
Aye.
Mr. Hartley,
Yes.
Ms. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Villegas,
Yes.
Ms. Wong.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, moving ahead to page 72 for AB 742. So this is the bill that was introduced to expedite licensing applications for applicants who were considered descendants of slaves. This is something that was introduced last year also, and it didn't complete through the process because there were a lot of concerns that everybody had with how to determine whether someone was descendant of slave, how the applicants would be able to prove that, and how the board would be able to verify that. And this is affecting all boards and bureaus at DCA. This goes hand in hand with the later bill. It's SB 518. SB 518 actually is establishing a whole new bureau under the Department of Justice to determine and handle situations when there are descendants of slaves, which takes away the original concerns from our board last year with this is how would we verify this information? How would the applicants do this? And in some cases, if they had a hard time proving this, or we had a hard time verifying this, it really wouldn't be expediting. It would be lagging behind when they could have been approved already under normal situations. And one of the other concerns that was expressed by a number of boards and DCA and other people were that how long, you'll hear it at the hearings, this was expressed, how many times will we choose groups to expedite to the point where so many people are being expedited that no one's being expedited anymore? I included analysis, 2 different analysis from committees on this, which I found very interesting on things unrelated to our board's mission, but were really interesting discussions and included those. The latest amendments on this, which were done on July 2nd by Judicial Committee, they coincide with the amendments with SB 518 for the Bureau, which is really talking about the organizational makeup and what they should do at the Bureau and the responsibilities they're going to have. It really doesn't have that much of an impact on us. If they ever establish this Bureau and they determine through their processes who is a descendant of slaves, then that would be the verification that both the applicant and the board would use if this bill goes through to expedite their license or their application process. So we really don't have much in the way of concerns with the latest amendments. Please pardon my typo in the recommendation. It's not Warch, it's Wash. Generally Missouri there. But yeah, staff is recommending the board take a watch position on the latest amendments. I will also add that you'll see that the analysis by both committees also very clearly point out that this is highly dependent. This bill, if it passes, is dependent on the Bureau being formed and SB 518 passing too.
Do I have any comments from the board or a motion?
I just have a quick question. So we voted a watch position at the April 3rd meeting.
Right.
And so, now are we voting on based on, this new version?
Yes.
Okay.
It's because there were amendments. If there hadn't been any amendments, I would just say the board doesn't need to take any further action unless they want to.
So I'll make a motion to move for the board to take a watch position on AB 742 as amended July 2nd, 2025.
I have a motion from Christina and a second from Phil.
Yeah, that's me.
Is there any further discussion from the board?
Just a note, in the future, if there were a federal law that would trump this or overtake this, would this bill not be as effective in the future?
Well, nowadays you can't, never doesn't mean never. But federal law traditionally does not overrule state licensing law. States are responsible for licensing.
That's what I
in
wanted
this
to hear.
respect.
Yeah, okay.
But I can't guarantee what would ever happen if something like that happened.
Right. So again, back to states' rights. So this is one of the examples where states' rights prevails over federal.
I would suspect if there ever was a federal mandate related to something like this, the states would have the authority to implement something to enact those federal requirements.
Okay.
I suspect that's what you will see most likely, if that ever should come to pass. Yeah.
Thank you, Rick.
Do you have any further comments from the board? No, seeing none, we'll open the floor up for public comment. Seeing none, moderator, can you please open up WebEx for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the motion or the bill, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. Call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on the motion or the bill? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Selena, can you call the vote?
President Martinez,
Yes.
Vice President Rufino,
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Ascari,
Yes.
Ms. D'Antonio,
Yes.
Ms. Haggard,
Yes.
Mr. Hallinan,
Yes.
Mr. Hartley,
Yes.
Ms. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Villegas,
Yes.
Ms. Wong.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to page 94. This is AB 1341. This bill is a result of concerns expressed by professional organizations, stakeholder organizations, and even this board in the past for quite a few years related to unlicensed activity. It's, in some respects, they focus on land surveying, but our board is always focused on the fact it could be unlicensed for any of our practices. This was something that was originally presented last sunset by these stakeholders, and an effort to try to get something in the sunset bill. The sunset committee accepted some of the ideas. This board agreed with some of those ideas. This is one of the ones that kind of has evolved out of the ideas that were originally expressed in that letter to the legislation, to the legislature and to the board. So the idea behind this originally was that in the Contractors Licensing Act, they have a section that they have several provisions in there that basically tells our licensees that if they have any, if they violate any other provision of these other acts, then their license or contractor's license could be subject to investigation and reprimand or whatever by discipline by the Contractor State License Board. So this was an effort. The sponsors are professional organizations that we work with all the time at our board here, or we hear from all the time at our board here. And effort to add a new provision underneath that section in the contractor's law that basically said any violation of the Land Surveying Act or any for unlicensed surveying could subject a licensed contractor to discipline by the contractor's board. Our board said, well, we need to expand that to include all of our licensees, not just land surveying. We've had many discussions with contractors board about this over the years. This also expanded to architects, not just our board, not just engineers, surveyors, and geologists, but architects also. The board had taken a previous position of support on this in our May meeting. It's been amended twice since then. It will likely be amended again. This is a very active bill. We have participated in many discussions on this. We were at the last hearing to be there for technical testifying, so to speak. If Hoover had any questions, which we did. Contractors Board has also taken a support position the last I heard on this. But there is some opposition from groups that are representing the laborers, from what I understand. I'm grouping them all as laborers because I'm not really sure who they all represent. But they have some opposition. One of their oppositions that they've been trying to work on is they should have some kind of reciprocity type of provision in our acts. Since we're not a sponsor of this bill, it's up to the author and the sponsors to decide how they want to accept any of that. We just get asked, how does this work with your acts? Is there any concerns from the board's point of view? And so we're there to represent what the board's concerns are on that, or if we have a lack of concerns. So we're continuing to work with them on that. We know that this bill has passed through the Senate BMP and Economic Development Committee, and it's now in appropriations. I'm sure they'll address this when they get back from their recess. We're continuing to monitor that. I reached out to the staff consultant at the Appropriations Committee recently on that, offering if you need a perspective from one of the licensing boards or from all the licensing boards that are affected, let us know. We're more than happy to meet with you to give you our perspective over the years. That's where we are with that. The current amendments, as last done on July 2nd, we are fine with what they've suggested. We're not sure about any other amendments they're working on right now. But as of right now, with the latest amendments, the board recommends that, or we recommend that the board take a support position on that.
Yep, Christina.
So I'm trying to think, what the legislative timeline is going to be, whether we will be able to see the final version, of the law before it's get to the governor's desk.
This will probably be the last time you'll see it before it passes through. If it passes through the Senate, being that there's been amendments in the Senate already, and there could be more amendments, it has to go back to the Assembly. If it passes the Senate floor, it'll have to go back to the Assembly. But this will likely be the last time you'll see this before it goes through that whole process, yes.
Val?
I so move that we take a support position on AB 1341 as amended on July 2, 2025.
I have a motion from Phil and a second from Rosanna. Is there any further comment or discussion from the board? Frank?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just have a quick question, Rick, that you may be able to clarify for me. So one of the arguments against this is that the California Business and Professional Code, Section 7110, already grants the authority to the contractor state license board to take disciplinary action against contractor who violate building laws of the states, right? So this AB 1341 seems to duplicate these existing enforcement mechanism. Does it duplicate?
So what it does is under that 7110, that section in the Contractors Act, already has the terminology building laws of the state. We're not really real sure what that exactly means, but they've had that terminology in there for years. They're adding provisions that refer to our acts underneath that as additional building laws of the state. And all they're really saying is that, all it's saying is if you have been found by this board or found by the architects board to have practiced unlicensed surveying, engineering, geology, or architecture, and that for us, that would be a citation and fine that's gone through its entire administrative process. Then that information could be given to the contractors board, and the contractors board then could choose to take action on that licensee because they violated one of these provisions.
Got it.
One thing that's really kind of been voiced very loudly by the sponsors and the author of this, and we have said the same thing, is that the way this law, this proposal is written, it doesn't expand any of the practice acts. It doesn't say the practice now includes this, or it doesn't take away what a practice act currently means. So in other words, if you're currently not violating any of this, you're not going to be violating it later. You shouldn't be worried about it. There are a lot of concerns being expressed by the opponents of this that there's going to be a lot more complaints. There's going to be a lot more actions to both our board and the contractors board on this. We kind of find that argument counterintuitive because if you're not violating the laws, there wouldn't be a lot of action. So we're not really sure where they're going with that, but I know there's some concerns on the other side.
So what I'm trying to understand is under the current law, without AB 1341, could you make a referral?
We could.
You
One
could.
of the
So
things,
is
there's
there any-
nothing stopping us now from sharing complaints are unlicensed citations with the contractors board, nor them with us. There are some informal ones that we've already done over the years, but there's also nothing that tells subjects of our complaints that if they're a licensed contractor, they need to reveal that to us. Sometimes we know it. We don't know if we've known it in all times. So all this really does is say that if there is a licensed contractor that has been found by a citation fine to have practiced unlicensed engineering, so to speak, and we have issued that citation fine, it's gone through the entire appeal process, that we will share that with the CSLB and they will have to decide what they want to do with it. They won't investigate the engineering or the survey and geology. They just know that we have found them to do that. Likewise, they could be doing the same thing. There easily could be a licensed engineer that's also a licensed contractor that, or someone that has violated their laws that they think is done as unlicensed engineering, they'll pass it to us. It's been informal. This kind of formalizes the process that we would pass it along, but it's up to them to decide where they want to go with it.
Okay.
We have also communicated to CSLB that best guess, based on what we've seen in the past, and knowingly know it's licensed contractors doing unlicensed surveying or engineering or geology, because a lot of times they're not licensed anything to our knowledge. They can expect maybe 10 to 15 referrals a year at the most. Some people are putting this out as being a lot more. Not from our perspective, from what we've seen in the past. So we'll see.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Any other discussion from the board? Opening the floor for public comment. Seeing none. Moderator, can you please open WebEx for public comment?
Certainly, this is the moderator. If anyone would like to make a comment on the issue, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand, and our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. We do have a comment from Rob McMillan. Rob, I'll send you a request to unmute. You'll have 3 minutes with a 30-second warning.
Good morning. Thank you for supporting this legislation. Rob McMillan, California Land Surveyors Association.
All right.
Oh, thank you for your input.
Thank you.
And I do not see any other requests for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
I would just like to add also in reference to Frank's question, if you look at page 95 in our last support letter on this that was issued to the legislature, we quote a section that as far back as 2011, the contractors board had posted what was referred to as an industry bulletin at that point on their website, telling all their licensees that if you've been found to be doing unlicensed practice, that you could be subject to discipline. So contractors board has been telling their licensees this for more than a decade. This pretty much is just formalizing that.
Selena, can you please call the vote?
President Martinez,
Yes.
Vice President Rufino,
Yes.
Dr. Amistad,
Yes.
Dr. Ascari,
Yes.
Ms. D'Antonio,
Yes.
Ms. Haggard,
Yes.
Mr. Hallinan, Mr. Hartley,
Yes.
Ms. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Villegas,
Yes.
Ms. Wong.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to page 108, which is SB 470. This is a bill that is seeking to make more permanent a lot of changes that have resulted over the last 5 years with the pandemic and how we handle open meetings and teleworking, not teleconferencing, sorry, not teleworking. Teleconferencing under the Bakley-Keene Act. Basically, it's formalizing the processes that we currently operate under as boards and bureaus. we've all expressed that we like the current processes. We've supported this at the May meeting. There has been no amendments since then. So I'm just providing this as informational. The board doesn't need to take any action at this point. Unless you have any comments or questions you want to talk about.
Comments or questions?
Is one of the provisions, well,
I know what you're going to ask.
you do?
I think I do.
Public notice of each individual's home if they're attending virtually was a,
Oh, no, that's the, no. If,
is that
if,
part of this?
so one of the options for the board or the body to meet is that board members could attend remotely. But when you do that, then you're in a situation where you may have to allow public participation at that location.
That was suspended for a time, right?
That was.
And now it's not,
Um,
and wouldn't be going forward?
it's not current. There are different, it's a little bit more, it's not as simple as that. It's one of the reasons why we don't encourage the board to do a hybrid type approach in that way, to where some of the board members are remote and some are physical. Unless we absolutely need that, we do have that option if we should ever have to do that. We encourage you guys to all either meet physically and allow the public to either meet physically or remotely, or we do it all remotely while allowing the public to be remotely. Yeah. It's much easier to set up and maintain and yeah.
Frank?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. If I can do a quick follow-up. And because I personally experienced this before this was, it's not quite enacted yet, but during the transition, I would go to a public library so that I wouldn't have to disclose my personal residence to have the meeting. But one of the things that this SB 470 addresses is precisely that you do not have to. And according, if you look at page 109, according to the staff report, page 109, specific detail of SB 470, under A, the last sentence reads, a remote location is not required to be accessible to the public, nor that the notice and agenda shall not disclose information regarding the remote location. So that addresses exactly, Mike, what you're.
That's if a minority of the public members are remote.
Yes,
Yeah, you still have to have a majority.
correct. And I think that's fair, as long as you have a majority present, but the
It
person,
used to be back pre-pandemic, before all these changes, that when we had board members that were attending by teleconference, they had to give that location, and that's probably what you're referring to.
yep,
And the public could be there. They had to be accessible situations, yes.
correct. And that's why I said earlier, I had personal experience because I did not want to give my personal address. So I would schedule, so it would be, you would have to go to the inconvenience of finding a public location, which in my case was a public library nearby my house. So I had to go make the reservation so that any members of the public can join if they wanted to at the library and not in my residence. I hope that helped, Mike.
Oh, I'm sure it helped them.
Did you say?
I said, I'm sure it helped you.
Okay. Opening up the floor for public comment. Seeing none, moderator, can you please open up WebEx for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the motion or the bill, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. Calling users can press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any requests for comment? I do not see any requests. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
You.
And there's no vote on that. So, okay, moving on to SB 518, which begins on page 130. This is the one I previously mentioned about establishing the Bureau for Descendants of American Slavery. The board previously took a watch position on this. It has been amended twice since then. The amendments, most of them are really about the administrative implementation of that bureau, how things will be conducted, and does not have any impact on the board's operations. So the board recommends, our staff recommends the board take a watch position on this as amended July 3rd, 2025.
Phil?
I make a motion to take a watch position in SB 518 as amended July 3, 2025.
I have a motion from Phil and a second from Christina. Is there any further discussion from the board? Seeing none, the floor is not open for public comment. Seeing none, moderator, can you please open WebEx for public comment?
Certainly, if anyone would like to make a comment on the motion or the bill, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. And the public will have 5 minutes, my apologies, 5 minutes for public comment with the 30-second warning. Are there any requests to comment? I do not see any requests. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Selena, can you please call the vote?
President Martinez,
Yes.
Vice President Rufino,
Yes.
Dr. Amistad,
Yes.
Dr. Asghari. I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Ms. D'Antonio,
Yes.
Ms. Haggard,
Yes.
Mr. Hallinan,
Yes.
Mr. Hartley,
Yes.
Ms. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Villegas,
Yes.
Mr. Wong, Ms. Wong.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to page 154 for SB 641. So what happened, especially during the LA fires more recently and during the pandemic, there were executive orders on how to deal with situations that could contribute to delinquency of renewal fees or to contribute to the lateness of delay in licensees being able to do certain things. Informally, a lot of us boards and bureaus kind of always accounted for that when we dealt with it. But during the LA fires, there were executive orders about giving licensees an additional 12 months to renew their license. They still had to pay the fee on time, or not delay to pay the fee. They still renewed their license, but the 12-month delay to pay the fee, things like that. This is a formal approach to implement those emergency waivers instead of relying upon executive orders. The board took a watch position on this at the May 29th meeting. It has not been amended since then. It did pass the Senate and it has passed the Assembly Business Professional Economic Development Committee on consent without any amendments. And that's where it's at right now. So there's no further action by the board. Just wanted to keep you informed on that.
Okay. Is there any discussion from the board? No. The floor is now open for public comment on this item. Seeing none, moderator, can you open WebEx for public comment, please?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the bill, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. And our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. Are there any comments on the bill? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving ahead to page 173. This is a new bill for you guys from us, SB 861. This is the Senate Committee's omnibus bill. So these are times for us to do cleanup on certain non-substantive changes. Professional organizations reached out to the committee asking to make a few changes on related to the Land Surveyors Act. The committee reached out to us to see our thoughts on that. We made some suggested minor revisions to the way the language was written. Otherwise, we didn't really have much of a problem with what they were doing. Not much of that ended up in the revisions. The only thing that ended up in a revision is when a surveyor has to file a record of survey, there's a certificate that they're filing, a certificate that the submitting land surveyor signs and dates and seals. And then there's one that the county surveyor also signs and dates and seals. They can't change the wording of those certificates for those maps. It was recognized that even though in other sections of our laws where our licensees are required to date when they sign and seal, there was no provision for the date for that certificate at RE 764.5. So it was suggested to add a date there, and we had no problem with that because it's consistent with our other sections that I think most people were probably adding a date anyhow. So the board, our staff recommends the board take a support position on this.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to move that the board take a support position on SB 861 as amended on June 30th, 2025.
I'd like to second that.
Seconding. Okay, I have a motion from Frank and a second from Mike. Is there any discussion from the board? Seeing none, the floor is open for public comment. Seeing none, moderator, can you please open WebEx for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the motion or the bill, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. If you're on a mobile device, that hand might be behind the 3-dot other options. Each speaker will have 5 minutes with a 30-second warning. Are there any comments on the motion or the bill? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Selena, can you please call the vote?
President Martinez,
Yes.
President Rufino,
Aye.
Dr. Amistad,
Yes.
Dr. Ascari,
Yes.
Ms. D'Antonio,
Yes.
Ms. Haggard,
Yes.
Mr. Hallinan,
Aye.
Mr. Hartley,
Yes.
Ms. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Villegas, Ms. Wong.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Betsy.
It just occurred to me how little legislation we've been directly involved in this year relative to a couple years ago when there were many, many bills promoting changes that were in the interest of the board. So it's good to see that we've got one here.
That's it for legislation unless anyone else wants to talk about with related to it.
Anyone? Nope.
Do you want to, most of the executive officers report are going to be pretty quick. The NCWS topic will probably take a little time.
Okay.
It's 11:30. It's up to you what you want to do.
Lunch. Everybody okay with lunch and coming back? Lunch it is. When should we come back?
1.
1? Everybody okay? 1 o'clock.
I think counting in the NCWS discussion and everything else that's going on, you'll probably easily be done with open session by 3 at the latest. By 3 at the latest. And then you have closed session after that. So I think you have sufficient amount of time to take lunch and do whatever you want to do.
Okay. So we'll go into recess until 1.